Hey guys, just wrapped up week 2 of Grandmasters, and I wanted to do another lineup analysis and kind of explain what I brought and why I brought it. I ended up finishing second, pretty good, not bad. This almost guarantees me, if it doesn't already guarantee me, upper division in Grandmasters after the first 3 weeks of Swiss, so that's great. Sucks I couldn't be first, but still fine, we take those. Now this week we had last year standing compared to last week where we had conquest, which means you can't quite bring the same strategy of trying to beat, a couple decks that people are bringing. You have to kind of bring a mix of archetypes so that you can't get just run over by your opponent. And what I mean by this is if you bring 4 aggro decks, for example, if your opponent has one good anti-aggro deck, he could just win against all of your decks because with in last year's standing, when you win with a deck, you keep playing with it. So if they get that matchup and then just keep playing their anti-aggro deck versus your entire aggro lineup, then you can just get knocked out. So because of that, you want to bring a variety of decks so that if they beat your deck, you can counter it with another deck and so on. You start ping-ponging like that. Because of that, of course, you can't target a deck. So this week I went for a more hybridized kind of a lineup. I still brought Res Priest. I'll go into detail about the cards, but just overview. I still brought Res Priest. I brought Egg Warrior with a couple of changes. I brought Aggro Demon Hunter or Tempo Demon Hunter or whatever you want to call it. And I brought Spell Druid. Very different from what I brought last week, but of course a different format kind of calls for that. Now, because we also had a few nerfs last week to some cards, aggro got a little bit weaker, specifically Demon Hunter. I expected fewer people to bring very aggressive decks, and even with that, there's usually only going to be at most 2 aggressive decks in a lineup. And if my plan is to kind of ban one, I can bring slightly greedier decks on and as a whole. Not to bring 4 control decks, but I can kind of tech my decks to be a bit greedier and slower for that sort of meta. And decks I was kind of expecting to see this week are Rogue, a lot of Highlander decks, which we saw a lot of people bring, and a lot of them made it to top 4 and top 8. We saw some Highlander Mage, which was very, very popular, Highlander Hunter, which a couple people had, and some Highlander Rogues. Against something like that, I chose to bring a more aggressive list with the Wrench Caliber and the Blastmaster Boom teched in. Now this just doesn't shut off their deck completely, but it can help add up after your initial aggressive opening. So if you can have some good aggressive early game minions, maybe Bloodsworn, Enrage something, and push with that, that's great. And if you don't get that start, you can kind of take the game a bit longer with your Wrench Calibers and stuff, whereas Livewire Lances might help you deal with some more aggressive decks if you're trying to beat Demon Hunter or Zoo or something like that. So because of that, I chose to include the bomb package here, but otherwise, Egg Warrior. I also included a copy of Sticky Finger. I thought Warrior would probably be a good deck to bring this week. So because of that, a little bit of a tech for the Mirror, which is still a pirate, which is drawn off Ankar. And because of that, I reduced 1 Sky Raider. Another thing you kind of want to think about bringing in last year's standing are sweeper decks. And sweeper decks are decks that can just kind of sweep your opponent, which means you win against all their decks with your one deck. Aggressive decks or just powerful decks with a high power rating. I don't know what you want to call it. Decks that are powerful, generally you want to bring a couple of those that you can just sweep against the field with. And to supplement those sweeper decks, you want to try to bring a couple of decks that offset the weaknesses of those 2 sweeper decks. Now I brought a slightly slower Warrior. I brought a greedier Spell Druid, and what I mean by greedier is I didn't include Wraths. There's no copy of Wraths here, so there's less removal. I added a Wild Growth and a Ysera, which for mid-range to control decks, I still expected some Priest as well, and I thought Ysera could help that matchup if they try to counter the Druid with a Priest. Generally just a bit of a slower Druid, and we see a second copy Solar Force as well to have a more consistent sticky board, and relying a bit less on just Innervate Glowfly and hoping it sticks. That can still be a good play, but this gives me the power to make really sticky boards against slower matchups where I don't need to aggressively fight for the board. So, that being said, I could be kind of run over by some aggro decks. The Warrior not having Livewire Lance means that you can just get run over if you don't draw the Armorsmith Risky Sipper stuff. It doesn't always happen, but it's quite possible. So because of that, I brought a very controlly Priest. I did expect some Druid as well as a sweeper deck, so because of that I included 2 copies of Master Spell. Shadow Manas can still be good against aggro. From last week you'll see I cut Smites and stuff. Still expecting aggro to be a bit weaker because Demon Hunter got nerfed, but if someone happens to bring 2 to 3 aggro decks, that would be kind of unlucky because I took out some of the single target text for that, but I still have a lot of AoE, which should be able to deal with some of the early game minions that people are pumping out. And of course it helps against Druid. A bit weaker against some of the other classes, but that's fine. I'm not bringing Priest to beat everything, I'm just bringing Priest to cover the weaknesses that my other decks might have. I guess I should point out, this is pretty heavy, like double Plague of Wrath, double Plague of Death, double Nova, double Breath of the Infinite, double Mass Dispel, like I want to make sure I beat Druid if I queue into it with this. Sometimes it still runs you over because, you know, Kael'thas is a powerful card, but increase my chances as much as possible. Third up, I don't quite have a Giga aggro deck, so if I do need to end the game very quickly against a deck, to knock it out, this would be my cue. This or Warrior can help me kind of be aggressive. I expected this to be banned a lot, so I didn't focus too much time on preparing for this. There's not really any fancy techs in here. I could have maybe considered what my opponents would bring that would leave Demon Hunter up and then try to tech for that. But I focused on making the other decks a bit more powerful. Or maybe not powerful, but a bit more teched. Standard double Fel Screamer, double Priestess of Fury. It is a bit heavy and it can be victim to some bad draws sometimes, but that's okay. It's still a relatively aggressive deck that can get the job done. Have I gone over my tech cards? I think I have. Yeah, so with the field expecting Rogue, some Highlander decks, a little bit of aggro, but not too much aggro, and generally a bit of a slower meta this week. I tech my decks to be a bit greedier, I tech my decks to be able to go a bit longer than just, you know, trying to end the game in the first 5, 6, 7 turns, although sometimes it still happens. Yeah, I'm hoping to keep doing these in the future, so subscribe if you're into that. Follow my Twitter as well. I'll post it below, and I will link all the deck codes for these decks in the comments below. If there's anything you want to see, feel free to leave a comment and let me know. Otherwise, smash that subscribe button, and hope to see you guys next week.